Most people believe that truly knowing someone takes months, sometimes even years. Machiavelli would disagree, because long before people reveal their opinions, long before they confess their fears, and long before they trust you enough to tell the truth, they have already revealed something far more valuable: their character. The strange part is that they don't realize they're doing it. Everyone believes they are carefully controlling the image they project. They choose their clothes, their words, their posture, their smile. They rehearse conversations before entering the room. They try to appear confident, interesting, successful, respectable. But while they are busy managing the performance, something much deeper escapes their control. Human nature. The first few minutes of any interaction are filled with tiny behaviors that no one consciously prepares. Micro-expressions, small reactions, moments of impatience, tiny flashes of insecurity, subtle acts of kindness, or hidden arrogance. These moments are usually ignored, not because they are invisible, but because most people are distracted by the obvious. They listen to words instead of observing behavior. They pay attention to confidence instead of consistency. They remember what someone said, but forget how that person treated everyone else in the room. Machiavelli understood something that remains true even today. People rarely reveal themselves through grand actions. They reveal themselves through ordinary moments, especially when they believe nobody is paying attention. This is why truly observant people often form surprisingly accurate first impressions, not because they judge quickly, but because they know exactly what deserves attention. Imagine walking into a meeting. Within seconds, one person dominates every conversation, another constantly searches for approval before speaking. Someone interrupts without noticing. Someone thanks the receptionist by name. Someone ignores the waiter completely. Someone listens far more than they speak. To most people, these are meaningless details. To someone who understands human behavior, they are clues, not conclusions. Clues, because no single behavior tells the whole story. But several small behaviors together often reveal consistent patterns that become difficult to hide. This is where most people make a mistake. They assume deception always looks dramatic. They imagine lies as obvious, manipulation as theatrical, arrogance as loud. Reality is far more subtle. The most convincing mask is usually the simplest one, which is exactly why very few people notice when it slips. Machiavelli observed that power rarely belongs to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the one who sees what everyone else overlooks. Observation creates an advantage that force never can, because information always comes before influence, and influence always comes before power. Think about the people you've trusted in your life. Now think about those who eventually disappointed you. If you look back carefully, you'll probably remember small moments that seemed insignificant at the time. A strange reaction, an unnecessary insult, a lack of gratitude, an uncomfortable silence, a smile that felt slightly forced. You noticed, but ignored it. Not because the sign wasn't there, but because you wanted your first impression to be wrong. The human mind has an incredible ability to explain away uncomfortable evidence, especially when we want to like someone. We tell ourselves, they're probably just nervous. They didn't mean it. They're having a bad day. Sometimes that's true, which is why wise observers never judge a person by a single moment. Instead, they collect patterns, like pieces of a puzzle. Each interaction adds another piece, until the picture becomes impossible to deny. This is what separates emotional intelligence from simple intuition. Intuition feels, observation verifies, and verification protects you from illusions. The greatest advantage is not becoming suspicious of everyone. It is becoming impossible to fool with appearances alone, because appearances are cheap. Character is expensive. Anyone can rehearse confidence for 5 minutes. Very few can rehearse genuine respect, patience, humility, or emotional stability. Those qualities leak through behavior almost immediately. Not because people are careless, but because authentic character is difficult to imitate consistently. In the next few minutes, you'll discover the first sign Machiavelli believed quietly exposes a person's true nature. It's so ordinary, so common, that most people witness it every single day, without realizing they have just learned more about someone's character than hours of conversation could ever reveal. The first sign rarely comes from what people say. It comes from how they treat someone they have absolutely nothing to gain from. Machiavelli understood that respect shown toward powerful people means very little. Almost everyone knows how to be polite when there is something to win. A promotion, a favor, an opportunity. Real character appears when there is no reward waiting at the end. Watch someone enter a restaurant. Notice how they greet the waiter. Observe whether they make eye contact, whether they say thank you, whether they become impatient over small mistakes. These moments seem ordinary, but they quietly reveal how that person sees the world. Some people divide humanity into two groups, those who matter and those who don't. The frightening part is that this division usually happens automatically, without conscious thought. A person who treats strangers with quiet respect often carries that respect into every important relationship, not because they are pretending to be kind, but because respect has become part of their identity. The opposite is equally revealing. Someone who instantly becomes rude the moment they believe another person has less status has revealed something words could never hide. Power does not change character, it exposes it. The second sign appears even faster. Pay attention to interruptions. Most people believe interrupting is simply bad manners. But psychologically, it often reveals something much deeper. Some interruptions come from excitement, others come from anxiety. But there is another kind, the interruption driven by ego. This person doesn't interrupt because they have something important to add. They interrupt because waiting feels unbearable. Listening becomes uncomfortable. Another person's story feels like competition. Their mind isn't absorbing information, it's preparing its next performance. Conversations stop becoming exchanges. They become contests. Winning matters more than understanding. And once you recognize this pattern, you'll notice it everywhere. Some people ask questions only to redirect attention back to themselves. Others pretend to listen while mentally rehearsing their next sentence. Their eyes drift. Their expressions become mechanical. Their attention disappears long before the conversation ends. Machiavelli believed observation always defeats assumption. Never assume someone values your opinion. Observe whether they actually make space for it. There is a profound difference. One person listens because they are waiting to speak. Another listens because they genuinely want to understand. Outwardly, both appear attentive. Internally, they could not be more different. Then comes another clue, perhaps the easiest to miss. Discomfort. Everyone experiences uncomfortable moments. A delayed order, a disagreement, an unexpected inconvenience, a small criticism. None of these situations are extraordinary, yet they reveal extraordinary things about people. Pressure removes polish. Not immediately, but enough for reality to leak through. Watch what happens when plans suddenly change. Some people adapt. Others immediately search for someone to blame. Some become curious. Others become defensive. Some remain composed. Others lose emotional control over something insignificant. It isn't the inconvenience that matters. It's the response. Because responses cannot be rehearsed. They happen before image management catches up. This is why emotionally stable people are so difficult to manipulate. Their reactions remain consistent, whether life goes according to plan or completely falls apart. Consistency is one of the rarest qualities you'll ever find. Most people are calm when everything favors them. Character begins where comfort ends. Then there is silence. perhaps the most misunderstood moment in any conversation. Most people fear silence. The second, a pause appears. They rush to fill it. They explain, justify, apologize, overshare, as if silence itself were dangerous. But silence is one of the greatest psychological tests ever created, because it creates pressure, and pressure creates revelation. Watch carefully. Who becomes nervous first? Who suddenly starts talking too much? Who begins defending opinions nobody questioned? Who laughs unnecessarily? Who desperately seeks approval? Silence exposes emotional dependence. Those who are comfortable with themselves rarely feel the need to constantly prove who they are. This doesn't mean quiet people are automatically wise, nor does it mean talkative people lack depth. The difference lies elsewhere. In emotional control, the ability to remain composed without needing constant validation. Machiavelli admired people who controlled themselves before attempting to influence others, because self-mastery always comes before social mastery. Someone who cannot govern their own emotions will eventually become governed by someone else's. Perhaps this is why the most observant people often appear surprisingly calm. They spend less time performing and more time paying attention. While everyone else is trying to be interesting, they are becoming impossible to deceive. And there is one final behavior, one that almost nobody notices. Yet once you see it, you'll never stop seeing it again. It happens within minutes, sometimes within seconds, and according to Machiavelli, it quietly reveals whether someone is driven by confidence or by fear. The final sign rarely comes from confidence. It comes from the need to be seen. Watch what happens when someone enters a room, not when everyone notices, but when nobody does. Some people remain exactly the same. Others immediately begin trying to recover the attention they expected to receive. They speak louder, interrupt more often, tell exaggerated stories, laugh harder than necessary, or constantly search the room to see who is watching them. To most people, these seem like harmless habits, but Machiavelli would have recognized something much deeper: the desperate need for external validation. People who know their own value rarely spend energy trying to convince everyone else of it. Confidence doesn't announce itself. It simply exists. Insecure people often believe power comes from being noticed, but real influence usually belongs to those who remain composed without demanding attention. This is why the strongest presence in a room is not always the loudest. Sometimes, it is the person saying almost nothing, watching, listening, understanding, while everyone else competes to be remembered. There is another detail that almost always appears within the first few minutes: how someone reacts when another person succeeds. This moment cannot be rehearsed. Congratulations may come easily, but genuine happiness is much harder to imitate. Watch the face, not the words. Observe the pause before the smile, the subtle tightening around the eyes, the hesitation, the forced enthusiasm. Envy rarely announces itself openly. It leaks through tiny contradictions between expression and emotion. Likewise, admiration reveals itself naturally. Secure people celebrate the success of others without feeling diminished, because another person's victory does not threaten their identity. Insecure people quietly compare everything. Every achievement becomes a personal competition. Every compliment given to someone else feels like something taken away from them. These reactions happen almost instantly, long before logic has time to intervene. That is why first impressions are so valuable. Not because they tell you everything, but because they show behaviors that become harder to see once people consciously begin managing their image. Over time, most individuals learn what others expect from them. They become more careful, more calculated, more selective with their words. The mask becomes stronger, which is precisely why those first moments matter. They exist before the performance fully begins. Machiavelli never suggested becoming cynical. He never encouraged distrusting everyone you meet. In fact, that would be another form of blindness, because suspicion can distort reality just as easily as naivety. His lesson was something far more practical. Observe patiently, collect patterns. Allow time to confirm what your eyes first noticed. One gesture means very little. Two may be coincidence. But consistent behavior, repeated across different situations, eventually becomes impossible to ignore. This approach changes every relationship. Instead of becoming impressed by confidence, you become curious about consistency. Instead of believing impressive words, you watch ordinary actions. Instead of asking, "What did they promise?" you begin asking, "How do they behave when they believe?" Nobody is judging them? That single question will protect you from countless disappointments, because character is never revealed during carefully prepared moments. It appears during ordinary ones. The waiter, the stranger, the disagreement, the silence, the unexpected delay, the small inconvenience. These ordinary moments quietly expose extraordinary truths. Perhaps the greatest lesson Machiavelli leaves us is this: the wisest person in the room is rarely the one speaking the most. It is usually the one observing what everyone else overlooks. Because while most people are busy trying to make a good impression, very few realize they are already leaving one. Every conversation, every greeting, every silence, every reaction is telling a story. The only question is, are you paying attention, or are you only listening to the words? Once you learn to observe behavior instead of appearances, human nature becomes impossible to ignore, and you'll begin seeing patterns that were always there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone patient enough to notice them. If this way of thinking challenged how you see people, then you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe to Power by Silence. Because every week we explore the hidden psychology behind human behavior through the timeless ideas of Machiavelli, Schopenhauer, Carl Jung, Nietzsche, and other great thinkers. Not to manipulate people, but to understand them. And more importantly, to understand yourself. Because true power has never belonged to the loudest voice. It has always belonged to the quietest observer. See you in the next video.